Question 1. By evaluating a recent deployment, Mr. Anderson notices that the failover in his NetScaler HP is slower than expected during network link failures. He suspects a misconfiguration in the heartbeat settings, which approach would best optimize failover time without creating unnecessary failover events. A. Increase heartbeat interval and decrease the node state timeout. B. Enable fail-safe mode with aggressive heartbeat intervals. C. Just monitoring to exclude non-critical interfaces from heartbeat checks. D. Configure redundant SNP addresses on both nodes. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Excluding non-critical interfaces from HAR monitoring ensures failovers are only triggered by critical resource failures, improving stability. A. Increasing heartbeat interval slows detection. B. Fail-safe with aggressive intervals can cause false positives. D. Redundant SNPs help IP reachability but do not optimize failover decision-making logic. Question 2. The fundamental question is how to maintain SSL floating performance during peak traffic while meeting compliance requirements for strong encryption. Which configuration approach should be prioritized? A. Use 4090 sysbit RSA keys with session reuse disabled. B. Enable SSL session caching with 2048-bit keys and hardware acceleration. C. Switch all SSL transactions to EC with software-based processing. D. Disable SSL compression and enable TLS 1.0 only for legacy compatibility. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. 2048-bit keys meet compliance and balance performance. The hardware acceleration and session caching reduce CPU load. A. 4096-bit keys are secure but slow. C. EC is efficient but software-only processing limits gains. D. TLS 1.0 fails compliance and reduces security. Question 3. From a practical standpoint, is wants to enforce context-aware access for remote users connecting to XenApp via NetScaler gateway. She needs a policy that adapts based on device type and endpoint scan results. Which feature is most suitable? A. Smart access with session policies bound at the virtual server level. B. VPN tunnel with static authorization policies. C. GLO-based redirection to separate gateways. D. Content switching based on client IP ranges. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Smart access allows dynamic access control based on endpoint conditions and policies at the virtual server level. B. Static policies lack adaptability. C. GLE handles GLO balancing, not context-based access. D. Content switching only considers IP, not device posture. Question 4. In light of recent developments, Mr. Kumar integrates NetScaler with Citrix storefront for internal and external users. He wants to ensure that authentication policies differ for these groups without deploying separate gateways. What is the best method? A. Apply session policies using policy expressions based on client IP. B. Create separate virtual servers for internal and external access. C. Use the same authentication policy for all users to reduce complexity. D. Rely on storefront authentication methods to handle this differentiation. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Policy expressions based on client IP enable context-specific authentication without duplicating gateways. B. Separate servers increase overhead. C. Same policies reduce flexibility. D. Storefront cannot enforce NetScaler-specific authentication rules. Question 5. The growing trend in application security demands proactive threat detection. Garcia is configuring NetScaler application firewall to protect against SQL injection and cross-site scripting. Which strategy offers optimal protection without overblocking? A. Enables the URL and form field consistency checks with learned signatures. B. Block all post requests to dynamic pages. C. Enable on HTML comment stripping. D. Use rate limiting on all inbound HTTP requests. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. URL and form field checks prevent common attacks while learned signatures adapt to app patterns. B. Blocking post disrupts functionality. C. Comment stripping alone is insufficient. D. Rate limiting mitigates dust but not inject chunks. Question 6. With the advent of GLB, Mr. Patel wants to distribute load between two data centers but ensure failover occurs only when the primary site is entirely unavailable. GLB method is most appropriate. A. Round robin with static weight assignments. B. Least response time with health checks on all services. C. Static proximity-based routing. D. Backup virtual server configuration with monitoring. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Backup virtual server ensures traffic shifts only when the primary is down. A. Round robin ignores availability. B. Least response time prioritizes performance but may divert traffic unnecessarily. C. Proximity ignores failover logic. Question 7. While examining NetScaler load balancing is new and must ensure that client IP information is preserved for web servers behind the appliance. Which setting is critical? A. Enable use source IP use it mode on the service. B. Configure persistence based on SSL session ID. C. Set load balancing method to least connections. D. Bind a content switching policy at the service group. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Use it mode ensures the backend sees the original client IP. B. Persistence manages session stickiness but not IP preservation. C. Least connections is unrelated. D. Content switching routes traffic, not preserve client IP. Question 8. In contrast to traditional single-tier authentication, Mr. Evans wants MFA integrated into the NetScaler gateway login process. Which implementation is most effective? A. Configure Radius as a secondary authentication method. B. Use LDAP only for all authentication needs. C. Apply session timeouts to force frequent logins. D. Configure GLB to redirect to an MFA-enabled site. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Radius as secondary allows integration with MFA providers like RSA or Duo. B. LDAP only lacks MFA capability. C. Session timeouts don't add true second factor. D. GLE redirection doesn't enforce MFA. Question 9. Given the circumstances, is Wright notices that firmware upgrades on her HeartPair sometimes cause sync issues. What is the best practice to minimize risk during the upgrade? A. Upgrade the secondary node first, disable preemption, then upgrade the primary. B. Upgrade both nodes simultaneously during a maintenance window. C. Upgrade the primary node first for faster recovery. D. Perform the upgrade without disabling failover mechanisms. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Upgrading secondary first and disabling preemption prevents unintended failover loops. B. Simultaneous upgrades risk total outage. C. Primary first can disrupt live traffic. D. Leaving failover active can cause instability. Question 10. Contrary to popular belief, session policies alone cannot ensure proper traffic optimization for specific apps. Which feature enhances traffic control by allowing complex conditions? A. Policy expressions with advanced rules. B. Basic monitor bindings. C. SNP address segmentation. D. VLAN tagging on interfaces. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Advanced policy expressions allow detailed conditional control beyond basic session policies. B. Monitors check health, not traffic logic. C. SNP segmentation is network level. D. VLAN tagging controls broadcast domains, not policy logic. Question 11. Throughout the course of troubleshooting, Mr. Daniels finds that his NetScaler is not redirecting users to the closest data center despite GLB being configured. Which misconfiguration is the most likely cause? A. Incorrect static proximity database entries. B. Missing monitor bindings, GLB services. C. Improper VLAN tagging on backend links. D. Overlapping SNP and MIP IP ranges. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Without monitors, GLB cannot verify service health, leading to routing issues. A. Incorrect proximity affects some requests but won't entirely disable routing. C. VLAN issues can impact connectivity but not GLB decision logic. D. Overlapping IPs may cause routing conflicts, but not specific GLB redirection failure. Question 12. When faced with a requirement to preserve SSL certificates' private keys from exposure during SSL flood, is HARP must decide the best deployment model. Which option offers maximum security? A. Store keys in the NetScaler's integrated FIPS card. B. Store keys in plain text on the appliance for faster access. C. Use shared NFS mount for key storage. D. Store keys only on backend servers. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. FIPS cards store keys in hardware, preventing extraction. B. Plain text storage is insecure. C. NFS sharing increases exposure risk. D. Backend-only storage negates the purpose of SSL flooding. Question 13. In the absence of consistent authentication for different access points, Yamada's users report varying login policies. How should he unify authentication while maintaining flexibility? A. Bind single unified authentication policy globally. B. Use advanced policy expressions to bind specific policies at the virtual server level. C. Create separate gateway for each user group. D. Configure GLB to route based on user credentials. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Advanced expressions allow tailored authentication per access point while using a unified framework. A single global policy removes flexibility. C. Multiple gateways increase complexity. D. GLE can't inspect user credentials for routing. Question 14. Taking into account increased SSL load during seasonal sales, Brooks wants to reduce CPU edge without lowering encryption strength. What is the most effective approach? A. Enable SSL session reuse with hardware-based acceleration. B. Switch to 1024-bit keys for faster performance. C. Disable OXP stapling to reduce processing. D. Use only software-based EC for all connections. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. SSL session reuse plus hardware acceleration offloads repetitive handshakes, improving performance. B. 1024-bit keys fail compliance. C. Disabling OXP may speed processing but harms security. D. Software EC can bottleneck EP. Question 15. Under the assumption that failover testing must be done without service disruption, Clark plans to simulate a high event. Which approach is safest? A. Disable the primary node manually while ensuring secondary takes over. B. Pull the network cable from the primary node. C. Change the host state of the secondary to stay secondary. D. Upgrade firmware on the primary during business hours. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Disabling the primary in a controlled manner tests failover cleanly. B. Pulling cables risks abrupt loss and possible sync issues. C. Forcing state secondary prevents failover. D. Upgrading in business hours risks downtime. Question 16. Historically speaking, misconfigured monitors in load balancing can cause services to be marked down incorrectly. Which best practice minimizes this risk? A. Configure monitors with correct protocol and response checks. B. Use TCP default monitors for all services. C. Disable monitors on critical backend services. D. Configure one monitor for multiple unrelated services. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Accurate protocol and response validation ensures healthy services aren't wrongly marked down. B. TCP monitors work only for simple checks. C. Disabling removes health verification. D. Sharing monitors across unrelated services causes mismatches. Question 17. By comparing user experience with and without session persistence, Ortiz notices certain web apps break without persistence. Which persistence method best suits SSL flooded applications? A. SSL session ID persistence. B. Source IP persistence. C. Cookie insert persistence. D. Destination IP persistence. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. SSL session ID persistence ties user sessions to the same server after SSL flood. B. Source IPA fail with NAT. C. Cookie insert works for HTTP but not necessarily after SSL flood. D. Destination IP is unrelated to session stickiness. Question 18. In summary of recent testing, Novik needs to ensure NetScaler gateway connections use the fastest path while maintaining site availability. Which feature should be used? A. GLB with least response time method. B. Half failover on each gateway node. C. VLAN-based routing. D. Static policy-based routing. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Least response time balances load and prioritizes faster connections, while GLB ensures availability. B. How applies to node redundancy, not multi-site. C. VLAN routing controls broadcast domains. D. Static routing ignores dynamic performance. Question 19. When analyzing backend server performance, Stuart wants to prevent NetScaler from sending requests to overloaded servers. Which feature directly addresses this? A. Load balancing with custom monitors checking CPU load. B. VLAN segmentation for backend servers. C. SSL flooding for backend traffic. D. Source IP persistence with USIP enabled. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Custom monitors can query backend CPU load, ensuring NetScaler avoids overloaded servers. B. VLANs segment traffic but don't control server load. C. SSL offloading improves performance but not load awareness. D. Persistence doesn't prevent overload. Question 20. The correlation between smart access and smart control lies in their ability to manage access dynamically. Which differentiator is accurate? A. Smart access controls access based on endpoint analysis. The smart control applies ICA policies dynamically. B. Smart access manages ICA policies. The smart control controls endpoint scanning. C. Both only work with static session policies. D. Smart control is a replacement for smart access in all cases. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Smart access uses endpoint analysis to define access scope. The smart control changes ICA policies on the fly based on conditions. B. This reverses their roles. C. Neither is limited to static policies. D. Smart control complements, not replaces, smart access. Question 21. In the context of the NetScaler administrator troubleshooting slow login times on NetScaler gateway, Mr. Sullivan notices excessive hour policy evaluations causing delays. What is the most effective way to optimize authentication processing? A. Consolidate hour policies using advanced expressions to reduce policy count. B. Disable hour auditing to improve policy evaluation speed. C. Increase the timeout value for all hour policies. D. Use multiple authentication virtual servers instead of policy expressions. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Consolidating our policies with advanced expressions reduces the number of policy evaluations per session, speeding up authentication. Disabling auditing. B. Risks losing security logs, increasing timeouts. C. Delays failure detection and multiple virtual servers. D. Add overhead and complexity. Question 22. Considering the evidence, Rodriguez wants to implement SSL flooding on NetScaler to reduce backend server CPU usage, but also needs to comply with strict ECESS requirements. Which practice aligns best with these goals? A. Enable SSL flooding with FIPS-compliant cryptographic modules and enforce strong cipher suites. B. Offload SSL without hardware acceleration to avoid additional certifications. C. Disable SSL flooding and let backend servers handle encryption. D. Use default SSL profiles without custom cipher suite configuration. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. While hardware acceleration improves performance, it requires additional certifications that may complicate ECESS compliance. Offloading without it is simpler to maintain compliance. Disabling offloading. C. Does not reduce backend CPU and default profiles. D. May use weak ciphers. Question 23. Through the lens of load balancing best practices, Kim observes that some backend services are marked down even though they respond to pings. What should he check to ensure accurate service health status? A. Verify that the configured monitor uses the correct protocol and port matching the service. B. Disable monitors to rely on simple IP ping checks. D. Increase monitor timeout values arbitrarily. D. Use VLAN tagging to segregate health checks from user traffic. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Properly configured monitors that test application-specific ports and protocols ensure accurate health detection. Disabling monitors, B, or relying on IP pings can misrepresent service health. Timeout increases. C, without rationale cause delays. And VLAN tagging, D, relates to traffic segmentation, not health checks. Question 24. Based on the information that a NetScaler gateway must restrict access based on device security posture, Isa Fernandez considers smart access policies. Which statement correctly describes how smart access achieves granular access control? A. It applies different session policies based on endpoint scans and user attributes. B. It limits user connections by IP address only. C. It disables session timeouts for trusted devices. D. It requires separate gateways for each access level. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Smart access dynamically applies session policies, including disabling session timeouts for trusted devices, enabling granular control, limiting by IP only. B is static and inflexible and requiring separate gateways. D is unnecessary overhead. Question 25. With respect to firmware upgrades, Mr. Green wants to avoid configuration loss and minimize downtime. Which procedure is most appropriate for an hub pair? A. Upgrade the secondary node first, verify stability, then upgrade the primary with failover disabled. B. Upgrade both nodes simultaneously during business hours. C. Upgrade the primary node first and reboot immediately. D. Disable half failover and upgrade only the primary node. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Disabling failover prevents unexpected failovers during upgrade, minimizing risk. Upgrading both simultaneously, B, can cause downtime, and upgrading the primary first, C, risks disruption. Upgrading the secondary first, A, is good practice, but failover should not be disabled. Question 26. From the perspective of optimizing traffic policies, ISING must create a policy that applies only TTS requests from mobile devices. Which expression should she use? HE rec header user agent contains mobile for E, SE client hello B, client EEC, ek ATHE rec method, ek get D, client up, SSC, K192.16811. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. The expression checks for mobile user agent strings and SSL client hello correctly targeted HE so from mobile devices. Port 80 B EATE method get C is unrelated to device type and IP address. D does not specify device or protocol. Question 27. In what ways can ISTA Black ensure that client IP addresses are preserved for backend server logs when NetScaler is in SNIP mode? A. Enable use source IP use it mode on the service or service group. B. Configure NetScaler in Mac mode. C. Disable session persistence. D. Use round robin load balancing. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Use it mode is required to preserve client IPs in backend logs. Mac mode. B. Relates to layer 2. Persistence. C. Does not affect IP visibility and load balancing method. D. Is unrelated. Question 20. During the process of setting a GLB, IS Johnson wants to ensure that traffic shifts to a secondary data center only when the primary is unreachable. Which method should she configure? A. Configure the backup virtual server for the secondary site. B. Use round-robin load balancing between both data centers. C. Enable leased connections load balancing. D. Use VLAN-based segmentation for GIP. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. VLAN segmentation does not control failover. The correct method is backup virtual server, round robin. B. And lease connections. C. Distribute traffic rather than ensure failover. Question 29. In light of recent developments regarding traffic optimization, ISTA Rivera wants to apply content switching to route users based on the URL path, which is the correct approach. A. Create a content switching virtual server with policies matching URL patterns. B. Use SSL floating to route traffic. C. Bind load balancing monitors to virtual servers. D. Enable our policies on backend servers. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Content switching uses policies that map URL paths to route traffic appropriately. SSL float-in. B. Does not control routing monitors. C. Check health but don't route. And A. D. Controls authentication, not traffic direction. Question 30. Given the circumstances where users complain about slow application access, is a Patel suspects session policies are improperly applied. Which best practice improves session policy management? A. Apply session policies at the virtual server level using priority-based evaluation. B. Bind all policies globally without priority. C. Use a single session policy for all applications. D. Disable session policy logging for better performance. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Applying policies globally without priority can cause conflicts and inefficiencies. Prioritized binding. A. Ensures correct audit. Single policy. C. Reduces flexibility and disabling logging. D. Reduces audit capability but not policy effectiveness.